Welcome to this week's episode of Connecting the Dots. Today's conversation is linked to the FIBO Women's Leadership Summit in Cologne on the 17th of April, where our guest, Anna Mathur, will be a keynote speaker. Anna is a psychotherapist and a multiple-time Sunday Times best-selling author, most recently of The Good Decision Diary. In this episode, we focus on one leadership skill many high-performing women struggle with, asking for help. Together with my co-host, Dr. Lou Atkinson, we explore why it's so hard, what it costs when we avoid it, and why learning to do less alone matters more than we think. Let's connect the dots. Welcome to this week's episode of Connecting the Dots. I am always excited, but I'm very excited about this episode because this is a keynote reveal linked to the women's leadership event that we're doing with FIBO April 17th in Cologne. And the women's leadership event is, of course, targeted at women, but it's also for anyone who is interested in women's leadership. I'm joined today by my co-host and colleague, Dr. Lou Atkinson, and one of our very exciting keynote speakers, Anna Mathur. And we're going to talk today about the broader keynote that she's going to be giving, which is about the case for slowing down. But specifically today, we're going to zoom into how to ask for help, the H word. So before we get started, let's learn a little bit more about Anna. Anna, can you connect the dots for us, connecting your career, what got you started, what brought you to where you are today, and how helping women just show up in their best selves became a big part of who you are and what you do?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This is such an exciting topic to talk about because it's something that not only the women that I work with as a therapist who are in no way lacking in competence or ambition or resilience, but are actually over-functioning, if anything, and just feeling completely burnt out. And I'm passionate about talking about this because I too have been stuck in this cycle for a long, long time. Yeah, where asking for help feels like the last thing that they should need to do. So I'm kind of just passionate about getting women, supporting women into that place where they can recognize that being a good leader actually involves letting other people stand beside you and leaning on people every now and again. And how do we even get to that place when sometimes being the one who is doing and coping and pushing and proving can be so intertwined with not only our identity, but also what we're rewarded for along the way. So my career-wise, I'm a psychotherapist, and I've been doing this since I think kind of 2009 when I started doing my master's. But for me, my earlier career was in marketing and advertising, and again, I did really well. I've always been that kind of type A personality, getting everything done. And that was all well and good on the surface. But underneath it all, was really struggling. It was just too much. And when I stepped into motherhood and added another layer of life, I've got three kids. I'm a little bit older now. My youngest one is 6, but another layer of demand and another area in which to do brilliantly in. And I think, like many women that are just really high functioning on the surface, we get applauded for coping and proving, and we get rewarded for kind of reliability and capacity. But I think what we often gradually realize, and a lot of the people that I work with get to this point, that the traits that get you promoted and praise can actually also be those very same traits that burn you out. Yeah. And myself and my clients and friends and people around me, often we get to this moment or we get to this phase where we start noticing that doing everything yourself is just no longer sustainable and also not actually aligned with the leader that we wanted to be. But where do we go from there? So those are the conversations that I'm really passionate about having, but also having, come to these points in my own life where I'm like, this is getting me good places, but I am not okay underneath the surface of it all.
It's the double-edged sword of that skill and that trait, that there's definitely a part that cuts. And it seems like we've honed one side of the sword so well, and then the other side that's hurting us is just not the skills to, I guess, regroup and create space. We've spent less time on, for sure.
Yeah.
Lou, now you've been on the podcast, you've hosted the podcast, but just for anyone who has happened to miss, can you just give us a whistle-stop tour of who you are and what you do?
Absolutely, yeah. I shall give you the very shortest version possible for anyone who's listened to the podcast before. So, yeah, I mean, fundamentally, I'm a behavioural scientist, an exercise professional, a health coach. Most of my work these days is advising organisations, both big and small, around sort of healthy behaviours and healthy behaviour change, and how to support and facilitate that in members or users or subscribers. I actually had the pleasure of meeting Anna in October last year. We were both on a panel around nervous system regulation for the launch of Yojo, who's a nervous system regulation provider. And, I think that a lot of what we were talking about at that event is probably some of what we're going to touch on today, which is how we, most of us live in quite a chronic state of fight or flight. And we need to put more effort and more focus around having that balance in our life. And the question then for me as a behavioural scientist is, well, how do we help people to actually do that? Because knowing you have to do something and being able to do something are two very different things. And so, yeah, it's not just about education. It's also about equipping people with tools. And I think that over my career, of over 25 years now, I have managed and mentored so many people where I can see that burnout is coming through, whether it's perfectionism, whether it's being a bit of a control freak, which is probably where I find I get a little bit close to the cliff at that point, is because I like to be in control of things. Or whether it's just the weight of expectations and the demands exceed our available capacity. And the frustration I've had is when I can see it happening and I've tried to intervene and it's happened anyway. So I think now we're potentially in a better place societally and culturally to understand the need for rest, the need for recovery, and how everything works together as a balance. But as I say, I think knowing that and being able to do something about it are two different things. And I know Anna's going to share lots of really good insights about how to make that happen.
It's building the bridge, right? So for this event, we have a wonderful WhatsApp group that has just actually exploded into almost 400 women who are sounding boards for each other. And the idea behind it is to connect women who are working towards making the world a healthier place in fitness and sport and physical activity and health tech and fit tech, regenerative health. And because we've got this network, we asked them what were the burning topics that they wanted to hear about at the Women's Leadership Summit. And the case for slowing down actually was just shot out as a clear topic. So Anna, like this is what you're going to speak about globally. Could you give like the broad categories that you shared already that are going to be included in that keynote, and then we're gonna zoom in on the help piece today.
Yeah, absolutely. So the case for slowing down, it's hard in our fast-paced environments and our fast-paced cultures, but also working environments where we're giving a lot. And I think what often goes undervalued is rest and slowing down. And it's not because we don't cognitively know that we need it, and we don't cognitively know that rest is the antidote to burnout, that we're trying to, often living on the edge of that state. It's just that it's really hard for so many of us to actually allow ourselves to get more of what we need. And I think lots of different things come into play, and we're going to be touching on kind of perfectionism. We're going to be touching on, control. We're going to be touching on identity and how often kind of that productivity becomes so ingrained in who we understand ourselves to be and what brings us validity. The feedback that we get that tells us that we're doing a good job, and all of those things. I think when we don't really value and respect and recognize our need for rest, they can just stand in the way. And so I'm going to be giving lots of tips and tools, a bit of neuroscience on how we can start recognizing the value, but also accessing it without adding loads of extra things to our lives. And this is where, that it's where kind of slowing down comes into it. But I think what often happens is we look at our diaries, we look at our responsibilities, and I get this response, and I know because I've said it myself, it's all very well and good telling me to slow down, but have you seen my diary? Have you seen my life? The thought of adding something in just feels, or even taking things away, just feels inconceivable. So it's looking at all the different forms of rest, looking at actually what we need to do sometimes to enable ourselves to do that, which is where we're going today, which is, accepting support, because we need people. We need people at the top. If we're going to create space and resource, we're going to need other people. And I think often we are encouraged to look at ourselves, look for the answers within ourselves. If I'm going to recognize my need for rest, right, how am I going to create space for that? What am I going to do? What am I going to add into my life? And it's all me. It's all down to me again to meet this need, when actually we can't meet all our own needs. As proficient and as intelligent and as experienced as we are, we cannot meet our own needs. We need people around us to enable us to find ways to do that and get more capacity. So yeah, that's just a little insight into some of the things that I'm going to be touching on.
Yeah, when you say that, the one question that pops up for me, and this is just like a reflective question, because we've been taught how to hustle. Our society teaches us how to hustle. We're not taught how to rest. But one of the friction points for me for slowing down that I always have to gut check is the worthiness piece. Like, do I deserve rest? Like, is that something that you hear more, or is that just a me thing?
Yeah, people just feeling very uncomfortable with that sense of, actually, I deserve to take this space and I need to take this space is one thing. I deserve to take this space and lean into it is another. And actually, some of the starting points with clients that I work with is actually, do the people that you love in your life deserve for you to take that rest? Because I will tell you, we cannot love well and we cannot lead well when we are burnt out. We are reactive. That part of our cognitive brain that is like the problem solving part, that is harder to access. We have less joy, less of that sparkle in our eye, because we don't feel at ease within ourselves. Because when we don't rest and slow down, we're a ball of adrenaline, right? We're reactive. We're not going to be able to tackle those stressful moments particularly well. So that's sometimes the starting point is I say to people, okay, you might struggle with your own deservedness for rest, but what about the people in your life that you love, that actually really benefit from you when you've got that sparkle in your eye and you've got that bit of ease, and you can, just choose how to respond instead of it just coming out sideways. And sometimes that's an easier access point for people because they value other people's experience of them more than they value their own experience. But I tend to find that, sure, do it for your family and your colleagues to begin with, but then what it does when you start taking more of what you need and you find more balance, actually you get so much more for yourself. You don't want to let go. You want to find more ways to integrate a bit more balance into your life, build self-esteem and confidence.
And because burnout is a very broad term, like I know that there's an official definition for it, but can we maybe frame that before going forward? Because I think like many terms that have been picked up by social media are loaded in a certain way, but they're in the way that they're presented might not be reflective of the way they were actually designed or defined.
Yeah, absolutely. So burnout is that state where you're frazzled. You know, it's kind of like a spectrum. At the very beginning, we might have mild irritability, less enjoyment in life, less ease, less presence, less ability to just feel like you can enjoy the benefits of some of all this working and striving, and that you can ease into rest at the end of the day, and you can feel safe within that you're sleeping well. And when we're starting to kind of move into this more depleted state, those good things in life that require resources feel harder to grasp. So you might find that actually I don't even know when I last laughed. You might find that you're more snappy. You might find that actually the things that used to bring you joy and the connections and relationships that you used to get a lot from, maybe you get a message from a friend saying, I'd love to go for coffee. And your instant response is, oh, that's just another thing to add to the list. So you kind of lose your spark, really. You lose that sense of enjoyment. And that when we don't address that, and I think what we often do is pile on the pressure, right? I need to try harder. You know, I need to kind of force myself to make more space for these connections. I need to get more tools in my toolbox, when actually, you know, instead of piling the pressure on, these are symptoms, these are signs that the pressure needs to be taken off. And at its worst, when we continue to be kind of bombarded by some of these stress hormones and we continue to live in that braced position, we can end up coming to a complete halt where your body and your mind just say, no, I can't. And that's a very scary place to be. I've been through kind of real systemic burnout where I could not function. And it was so humbling, because I realized that, you know, we push beyond and we push beyond and we push beyond. And we do get to a point physiologically where there is no beyond left. And often that is the point that I'm trying to kind of encourage people listening to this, you know, put some things in place now, because when you get to that point, there is no choice. You're just done in, and you can't anymore. And you almost have to reshape your life. You know, a lot of people call burnouts breakthroughs, because you cannot go back. You cannot kind of build a way back into life as it was, and you won't want to, because it just shows you how unsustainable that was, and it forces you to find new habits and new ways of being and connecting and supporting yourself and allowing yourself to be supported. But it's looking for those little kind of simmering signals along the way where you're feeling more reactive, there's less joy in your life, and you deserve those things. You deserve joy in your life. And that's what gets robbed when we're over everythinging.
I love the way that you said there is no beyond, because that just basically sums it up. It's the hardest stop ever.
Yeah.
And I heard like one of my coaches, actually Krista Scott Dixon, when I was working with her, termed the phrase heartaholic, or coined the phrase heartaholic. And I'm like, that's exactly what it is. It's just like addicted to being hard on yourself and addicted to the push. And it's like, I have people in my life who really are the push. And then fortunately, from a contrast standpoint, one of my aerial acrobatic coaches is just so wonderful and gentle with herself. And I've watched her go through her pregnancy and just like embrace the changes and embrace the recovery and her journey back to becoming a professional dancer. And I'm just like, oh, that's what gentleness looks like. And it's so lovely. And I feel like we need to actually start hunting for those people who do things with, you know, gentle, who treat themselves gently and with grace. And I think it's a really good reflection or contrast to the inclination to push.
Yeah, and I think it's actually learning to trust that we can do great things with a bit more gentleness. And I think a lot of us, our base level of stress is so high that we don't actually feel safe when we're gentle on ourselves. It feels so alien and unfamiliar that there's that part of our mind that goes, there's something wrong with this, I'm being lazy, or this isn't how good things happen. And I love the metaphor of, and actually, this was my lived experience at school, which is where I got it from. When I was in year 3, all the way back, this is how traumatic it was. I had this teacher and she was horrible. She would shout at us. She was so disciplinarian. We were terrified of her, and we all did great work. We did brilliant work because we were scared. And in the teacher next door, also the class did brilliantly and they got good results, but she was gentle and she was, she was firm and she had strong boundaries, but she was gentle within it. And if someone was having an issue or they couldn't kind of get something quite right, she would just take time and talk to them. And I think is this fear that if we go gently on ourselves, what will that mean for my life, my work, my achievements, my productivity, and this mistrust that things will be okay and they can still be good. We can still do well, but actually we might be weller within
better.
it.
Yeah. That's really funny that our baseline is such a high stress level that just, taking a step back feels like wildly uncomfortable.
Yeah, very uncomfortable.
Do you think, Anna, again, thinking from a female point of view, I think we're all quite familiar with the sort of, superwoman complex, I call it, where in our current, day and age, we are the some of the generations, I'm not saying we're all the same generation, but the current generations of adult women, were raised under that umbrella of, more rights, more access, more opportunity. And so we have the pressure of kind of making the most of that opportunity and therefore being high achievers in other aspects of our life outside the home, but also still bearing the expectation of being the caregiver, taking on a lot of the mental load. And this again isn't to try and claim that women have it worse than men in any way, shape or form. Myself, I'm not a parent, so I don't have all of that expectation and those caring responsibilities. But I do still feel that coming at it from a baseline point of view, there is an element for some of us as women of feeling that responsibility to achieve on all of those multiple levels. And therefore perhaps we need to give ourselves again some credit and some kindness to recognize that those expectations are quite specific to many of us that perhaps don't apply to other people.
I think that's so true. I had a really interesting conversation with my mum as I was writing one of the books about this, and she was comparing her experience of being my age with my experience of being my age, and we were talking about motherhood and we were talking about work, and she was saying we are in a digital generation, right? We are overwhelmed. We have so much information in many ways that is incredible. But with it can come this expectation that we know everything that we need to know, and therefore it raises the bar of, if, for example, we have all these books on leadership telling us how to be a brilliant leader, and we have all these books on parenting with all this research, and then we have social media where all the highlights are, and it's like it just that raises the bar even more so, and the pressure on our generation, I think. We're bridging this gap of being parented in one way and kind of in having the working life modeled to us in one way, and being gifted freedom perhaps that previous generations didn't have, but also knowing there is something very unsustainable and high pressure about this, and we're struggling under the weight of it all, and we want to try and find a different way for future generations and for the people that we're leading. And it's huge. I think we're at this turning point where we're trying to work out, what do we do with this pressure? What is sustainable? Where do we place the bar of what we expect of ourselves with all of this knowledge that we have been given and have access to? So I think, it prompts some compassion for ourselves. So we think, it's a lot. And do we take all of that?
Yeah, and you made a really important point to me again, as a psychologist, behavioural scientist, around how certain behaviours and certain approaches are really reinforced. And I think that's the same thing. I think there's the expectation that as a female leader, perhaps we are expected to do more than just be an absolute rock star at work. We're also then expected to be, crafting handmade Christmas decorations for the gram and, all of the other things. So I think, like you say, if we are looking at this as potentially a turning point, we talk a lot in the work that we do on sort of equality and allyship, is actually, what can other people do, and what can we do as a culture shift? So whether you are working for someone or whether you have people working for you, what is the shift in your thinking that you can make that will start to challenge some of those sort of beliefs and assumptions about what great looks like? And for me, I think you've absolutely nailed it to say, well, when those sorts of, high performing, do everything type of behaviours are really reinforced and rewarded, of course we're going to continue to do more of those. So, and I guess this comes back to the asking for help thing, so I'm going to let you talk about that in a moment. But, that idea of actually how do we reward and reinforce people who are doing that? How do we shift the narrative to say, actually, it isn't always about the hustle, and being a good leader is exemplifying what you expect in other people?
Yeah, absolutely. How do we do well and stay well behind the scenes as well? It's
a huge question, right? Shall we bridge to the asking for help? Because I think this is the big one of the key tools about, like, how, if you're holding the weight of it all, might it be a bit easier if you distributed the load? So this is the paradox that I always find so funny. And I can remember, like, through the course of my career, like, asking people what they wanted to do with their lives and in their careers, whether it was like in an interview or at a seminar or something like that. And most of the time, the answer involved something about helping other people or making an impact on society. So when I hear that answer so many times, but on the other side of that, it seems to be the hardest thing for people to do, actually asking for help. So, like, what's going on there? Like, why?
Yeah, and I think we senior women, women in leadership and women as a whole, often we struggle to ask for help. We don't do it enough. So why? It's not because we don't value collaboration. It's not because we don't value teams, but there are things that get in the way. So I think, to name a few of them, this internalized expectation to be competent, calm, and contained, that sense that to be a good, successful person, I need to seem calm all the time. I need to kind of give the impression that everything is doable, and to be contained, to not be externalizing some of that stress, which means that everything gets internalized, or it comes out sideways behind the scenes in kind of mental health challenges and feeling disconnected from relationships. I think also there might be this fear of being seen as less capable once you've reached this seniority. You've kind of got to this point from striving and getting your head down and getting it done, and it's very much been a case of kind of proving yourself. So therefore, when you get to this place of leadership, actually, how do I let other people in? How do I let other people kind of step alongside me in a way that I need them to, so that it's sustainable? I think also this sense that needing help somehow invalidates how hard you work to get there. If I need people now, what does that say about my capability? I think we've also got the kind of the gendered conditioning, as you were talking about, how being helpful is praised and encouraged. And therefore, needing help, is that needy? And I think we've often, if we've struggled with boundaries in how we're supporting other people, sometimes we can take responsibility for how someone else feels if we accept support. So if we have felt resentful, and this is often the way, if we have given and given without boundaries, without the ability to say no, without the ability to say, actually, I'm not able to, at this point, say authentically yes and throw myself into it because I don't have capacity.
Right.
If we haven't been able to do that, often what we do is we give. We struggle with burnout. We struggle with resentment. We struggle with some of those feelings of like, if you really knew what this cost me. So the assumption then can be that we project that onto other people, that if we allow people to help us, that they somehow will be harboring that secret resentment and frustration towards us. And I think the more we recognize this and the more that we are able to take responsibility for the yeses that we give out, the more readily we can allow other people to support us, because that is their responsibility. If someone else is saying yes to supporting us or helping us, then that is their responsibility. If they're feeling resentful, if they don't actually have capacity, that is for them. So I think the more trusting we are with our own authentic decisions in agreeing to support other people, the more trusting we can be that other person, that responsibility sits with them. So I think helping others reinforces identity. It reinforces value and belonging, and that feels really good. But needing help can often trigger a feeling of vulnerability. It might trigger shame. It might trigger actually a loss of control. If I let someone take that on, what if they don't do it as well, as quickly, to the level that I would do it? What does that mean for me? So for many women, usefulness has been linked to worth for a very, very long time. And if your nervous system learned really early on that being capable kept you safe and accepted and valued, then yeah, asking for help, it can feel literally threatening. That's why it's hard. It's not just new and unfamiliar. It's nervous system wise. Your nervous system is going, this doesn't feel safe. Letting someone else help me here doesn't feel safe, even when intellectually you know it's reasonable. So I think some of those things are the contributors to why we are so willing to support but find it hard to ask for it.
I think it's wild that there's a great likelihood that one of the reasons I don't ask for help is because I'm projecting my tendency for martyrdom on someone else. Yeah. Like that's like might need to check in there.
Yeah, because you think, man, if you're helping me, does that mean you're harboring, secret resentment, or you're just feeling frazzled because I'm asking more from you than you have to give and you're giving it to me? Yeah.
And so what are the costs of not asking?
Okay, so let's have a little think, for the leader, what are the costs for the leaders not asking for support? Chronic overload. Doing too much for one person. Maybe your work is leaking into your potential rest times, even if you find it hard to accept that. Maybe you have reduced clarity and creativity, because when we're frazzled, when we are juggling too much, we have reduced clarity because that cognitive part of our brain is harder to access. We are more in that kind of sympathetic nervous system. We feel like we're just braced. We feel like, sometimes I feel like I'm being chased by a bear when I'm walking around my own house or when I'm sat at my desk. Literally, we can have that physical response of we are literally in a threat state here. We are just having to get through it. And when we are in that state, we don't have the clarity. We don't have creativity, because that actually requires us to be in a more rested, safe state to daydream and think, oh, what could this look like, and go off on tangents, and those places where we find creative ways to solve problems and break through things. Increase reactivity. We're like a bundle of stress. We're going to be reactive. We're going to respond to team members and people around us in ways that we're probably later going to lie in bed and think, oh, I wish I hadn't said it like that. Or we might offend people. We're going to feel fatigued because it is mental stress. It's physical stress. So for the team, what does it mean for teams that we lead? Disempowerment. People want to step up. They want to help. They want to show that they are capable too. So a lack of ownership for them when we are constantly kind of clawing back the reins a little bit. Missed opportunities for growth. We can stunt the growth of the people around us when we don't ask for help and we don't let them help. And for the organisation as a whole, what might that mean for the organisations that we're leading in? The bottlenecks, where actually there's so few people at the top because there is fear in letting go and letting people step in and step up. Burnout risk, where the leaders are just burnt out and not functioning well, and a culture where coping is valued more than sustainability. So real cultural stuff here as well. Yeah, so there's just so many costs, and the thing is, when leaders don't ask for help, we don't suffer quietly. We unintentionally teach other people not to ask to, no matter how willing we are to give it.
I think that's the most powerful downstream lesson, right? Like if you don't ask, you don't create the environment where other people ask. So that horrible tendency just keeps on keeps on going all the way down the line.
Yeah.
One of the things that Lou and I talk about a lot in some of the leadership programs that we do is the positive psychology life wheel. And I think this is also a really cool way to kind of create perspective. If you're overperforming, and for so many women, it's in that work category, maybe you're like at an 8 or a 9 out of 10 in terms of how you're feeling from a success standpoint in that domain. But if you look at the other parts of your life, those are the hints to, what the trade-offs are. Yeah. So I think that for me, I always keep that in check, because for so much of my life, that work piece got so much amplification, and the other parts had to kind of play second fiddle, unfortunately. And that's definitely not the kind of person that I wanted to be in the other roles that I carry. So
yeah. And I think sometimes this is where the beauty of asking friends, maybe partners, if you are struggling to see, and again, when we're in that place, we lack the clarity. Sometimes we can't see the wood for the trees. It feels like pure survival. And actually, you might be having the time of your life if work's going well and you're getting good feedback and it feels productive. You might not be seeing the lived cost of the fact that all of your energy and capacity is going into that one place. But if you're brave enough to ask friends and family, maybe to say, well, what do you think about my balance? And they might say, you know what, you're just not as fun anymore. I don't feel as connected, or we haven't had a proper chat in ages, or you just don't see me yourself. And sometimes it gives this really, more insight into, we might not always see the cost when we're in it, but others might be experiencing that of us.
I think I've got a really great example of a friend of mine who runs her own studio. She's super smart. She's created something really special, and 2 Christmases in a row, she's gone away on holiday. And I have said, look, leave the studio with me just for a couple of weeks. I promise you I won't break it. I will look after it. I will look after it. And luckily, she trusts me enough to do so. And both times she's been away, we've been in constant contact, not because she's worried about the studio, but because she's coming up with so many great ideas. And she's writing things, she's planning things, she's achieving things that I know she couldn't have done if she was in the studio day after day after day after day. And she is questioning me to say, why am I not resting? Why am I not switching off? And I'm saying, no, because this is the benefit of the space, the distance, the relief of knowing you don't have to deal with as much of the day-to-day. Don't get me wrong, she still does stuff behind the scenes, but it's just enough of a break and enough of, hey, someone else has got my back, that it allows all of that creative thinking that you talked about, Anna, all of that clarity, all of that being able to see the wood for the trees. And so it's not just, for me, that asking for help and rest together isn't about going away from what you're working on or what you're passionate about. Because again, we know in the psychology field, coming back to your point about identity, if you try and enforce rest, or when people reach the state of burnout where they have to rest, as you say, they have no option, that can be really, really traumatic for someone, because you're removing a big chunk of their identity and they no longer feel connected to who they are. They're asking a lot of questions. So actually, again, I think having a support mechanism that allows you to get distance, space, physical rest, of course, catch up on the sleep, all of those kinds of things, but get away, get some perspective. That's where the magic happens to me, and I've seen that now 2 Christmases in a row, and I hope that for the rest of my life I'll be able to look after a studio for a couple of weeks so that she can go away and do that, because I know by the time she comes back, that studio is going to thrive and grow and expand, and she's going to do great things because she allowed someone else to take just a small amount of that burden on. So I think she's a good lived example of how this actually works.
I think that's so good. And we could take it gently, especially if this is something that feels really threatening to begin with. Like handing something over to someone. I bet you probably had to tussle with her and probably had to spend time reassuring her and encouraging her. And maybe there were many feelings for her as she did that the first time. I remember getting to a point with my work when things had grown and I was very much doing everything on my own. And I'd employed someone to help me out with social media a bit. And I gave them my logins. And it felt like a massive thing to give them my logins. It had taken me a long time to get to this point, and I could have done it a lot earlier. And a couple of days later, I changed the password, so she was locked out. I just couldn't handle it. And then I know, and she was like, "Excuse me, Anna, I can't get in to do the job that you're paying me to do." And I just couldn't handle it. And I think the next time lasted a little bit longer and a little bit longer. And I think what we're doing is our own experiments, really, our own social experiments on how can I let go a little bit of holding this so tightly, or how can I give that person a little bit more autonomy? How can I, and just kind of growing, nudging that comfort zone a little bit more each time, so that I think knowing our ultimate fear would be really helpful. Like if you can ask yourself, what are you scared of?
Yeah.
Maybe she was scared, Lou, that, it would all go to pot and the clients would all leave and they'd never come back and the business would be completely dissolved. And I think sometimes it's really helpful to name that worst case scenario, because for me, I thought maybe my business just wouldn't survive without me doing everything all the time. And I think what it does is we find gentle, small steps to kind of let go a little bit and let people step in and support us. We start realizing that actually there's more of me to go round now. Actually, I'm feeling calmer. I'm responding better. People might do it differently or to a different speed, but it's not me that's doing it. And sometimes that's the most important thing, is that you win a little bit of yourself back. So I love that story, and what a gift that you've given her. And I'm sure it's a gift that she's given you in allowing you to do that for her too.
Well, exactly like you said, I think you make some really good points about sort of that opportunity for other people to grow. And again, I think as women particularly, we're always quite focused on nurturing, and we are, as you say, by nature we tend towards the collaborative. And so actually a lot of us, again, in our network and when we've been on leadership programs and we talk about what makes you happy in life, it's often about seeing other people achieve or supporting other people to grow, and for me, I was very lucky I had a management position right from day one of my first ever graduate job, which is terrifying. But the privilege of that was that I knew I was in that position. I knew that it was a little bit crazy that I was in charge of 20 people when I was fresh out of university. So I started it with the assumption that they know how to do their jobs better than I ever could. And my job was to learn from them and support them. And that is something that I've carried through my entire career and has really served me well, because I am not arrogant enough to think that I have all the great ideas, and I wrote a note to myself when you were talking, Anna, about why some people might not ask for help, and I wonder if some of that is about credit. Like if I ask for help and someone comes up with a great idea or does something really well, maybe better than I would do, who gets the credit? And I think what we often see is actually that the leaders that are the most well respected, both internally and externally, are the people who are quick to acknowledge that they didn't get there on their own, and they wouldn't be there if it wasn't for all the great people that they work with, for, and who work for them. And for me, that always comes across really, really well. Yeah. That attracts me to that person rather than makes me think, oh, they've somehow taken advantage or they've got there off the backs of someone else, because they're acknowledging that we're not islands and we can't do it on our own. So I wonder if there's something in there as well about the joy of being able to give credit to other people.
And the transactional nature of it, because if you're coming at it from a kind of a fear-based, I'm not going to get credit, it wasn't my best idea. I mean, that's that's a really small world your head's living in to start with. But the other side of it is if you're in an environment where it's always, I do something, you do something, or that was the space that you were brought up in, or like the type of relationships that were modeled to you, I can imagine that could also be a barrier to asking for help, because you feel like there's now a debt owed. How do you start asking for help? Like what's the way?
Yeah, and how do we start doing it without it feeling really vulnerable and exposing and like a massive leap? So I've got some little scripts here that I've written, but I think thinking about how you can start small and specific rather than just these big kind of global shifts in your life. And asking for support isn't the same as asking for rescue. And I think sometimes that's almost like this fear that if I'm asking for support, someone's going to think I need rescuing, that I can't do any of this. And it's this kind of like fatalistic understanding of what it is to be supported. We know about independence, and I think this is kind of what we're talking about here, really, this kind of furious independence. It comes down to me and everything comes down to me. And we know about codependence, where actually we're so dependent on someone else that we don't even really know what we're capable of or have confidence in ourselves as individuals. But what we're talking about here is interdependence, which is actually that kind of middle ground, really healthy. We know what we're capable of. We know where our blind spots are. We know where our weaknesses are, and that is not failure, that's total humanness. And therefore, the more we have awareness of those things, the more we can be kind of more complete in having other people step in and fill some of those gaps. So I think finding ways to frame requests around outcomes rather than inadequacy, and practicing kind of neutral language, less justification, less apology, because our hearts hear the words our mouths say. If we're constantly apologizing for seeking and accepting and needing support, which we do, then, we're constantly reaffirming this message that we're somehow doing something wrong in it. So some examples might be, I'd really value another perspective on this. It's like, I'd really value your thoughts. I'd really value your input. Can you take this piece so I can focus where I'm most effective? Again, it's just recognizing that we have limited capacity, humanness. Can you take this so that I can focus where I am most effective? It's a really nice way of saying, I'm probably better doing this. I'm probably better focusing on this. Maybe saying, this isn't sustainable at the current pace. This isn't about you and your failing. It's just, this is not sustainable at this pace for a person. Can we look at redistributing? So, these are ways of saying that you're not confessing something in asking help. You're not apologizing. You're just finding a way to calibrate things so that they're sustainable. So kind of practicing different ways of going about it could be really helpful.
And probably not getting discouraged, because the first time you do anything feels awkward and icky. So probably there must be a challenge of continuing along a help path to practice the skill.
Yeah, I mean, we can be so dejected, can't we? If we have literally had to cheerlead ourselves into asking someone for help, and they might have no idea of the mental process and how that feels so pioneering to us, and they say, no, I can't, or there's an awkward person. yeah, or an awkward response. It doesn't mean that asking for help was wrong, and I think it's really important to hold on to that. How someone responds is due to a number of factors, many outside of your awareness and control. It might be that you got them on a bad day, who knows? But one awkward response does not mean that asking for help was wrong. Sometimes the system isn't ready. Sometimes the insight might be really sound, but actually there's just some other piece of the puzzle missing. You're building a skill here. It's going to be uncomfortable. You're going to come up against barriers. You're not seeking perfection. You're seeking a new way of being. So I think it's important to think, progress is not measured by how other people respond to those requests. It's measured by whether you continue to listen to your own limits, whether you continue to ask for the support that you need. And when someone says yes, and when you see that they're joyful in doing so because that's authentic for them, that is so empowering. It really is. And it starts giving you a little bit more confidence and a little bit more confidence, so that even if you do get those rejections, you start recognizing that actually that's because of that other person's capacity, and maybe they're saying a nice, authentic no rather than saying a yes and then resenting us down the line or moaning about us at home. So it's trusting as well. Yeah.
So stick with it. So I cannot believe how fast this has flown. I knew it was going to, but are there any closing thoughts? You've got Lou and Anna, and then I have one more thing to wrap us up.
I mean, I just say, thank you for everything you've shared. I think there are some incredible, like, tangible tips in there for people to start thinking through that process of, would it benefit me to get some support and help, and looking at the bigger picture rather than, constantly firefighting all the time. I think we tend to, as you say, get to the point where we need rescuing rather than asking for help before we get to that point. So I think that's been super helpful, and actually it's a big plug for our network, Jen, because actually that is one of the great things about the collective network, is that we have created, I feel, a safe space where people feel they can ask for help, they can share ideas, they can just express how they're feeling, what they're going through, and they will always get a supportive response. We can't always take things off of someone physically, but just the ability to be able to sort of sense check things or ask, to bounce ideas off someone, it is all part of asking for help. So if you're not already a member of the collective network, please join.
That sounds amazing.
We'll put the link in the episode information. Any like words of wisdom, closing thoughts, Anna?
Yeah, I think if people are listening to this thinking, oh, I'm at that point where I need support, whatever that may look like in whatever area of your life, I think just ask yourself, I might look like I'm doing well, but am I living well? Am I feeling well? Is this sustainable? And I think if the answer is no, and maybe you've lost a bit of that sparkle, or you've lost some of that creativity, the things that you value so much, maybe the depth of connections that normally bring you joy, then just start thinking, what can I do? What do I need? And I think often the first sign that you're doing this well, whether you're taking those little steps in those safe spaces, and that's why this community is amazing, because it's those safe places to start asking for help, where you're more likely to be met with kind of warmth and willingness. And it might be that even in your family unit, even in your friendship group, someone might offer help. And you would always say no, don't worry about it, I'm fine, thank you. But start challenging yourself in those safe spaces to say, you know what, I'm going to say yes. Everything in me wants to say no, but I'm practicing accepting support more. So yes, I will do that, but know that I want to take it back. And as you do this in those safer spaces, it starts to feel less threatening and more familiar, and you start recognizing the benefits and the balance that brings. And slowing down is not about doing less because you can't cope, or seeking support because you can't cope. It's about doing less alone and knowing that you're not alone in it. And learning to ask for help is one of the most powerful ways that people in leadership can protect their energy and their clarity, and importantly, the longevity of the job that you love. So doing it for many reasons. So start testing it out and learning.
Well, I feel like I've taken as much away and like absorbed as much of this podcast as everybody else who is going to listen. So I guess my challenge to all of us and anybody that's listening is just to, this week, ask for help one more time. Ask for help in an area that's probably kicking around in the back of your mind that you should. One of your shoulds. Just go ahead and act on it, and consider this the challenge to take the step. So if you want to hear more about the case for slowing down and the broader conversation and the broader skill sets required to living well, please join us at the Women's Leadership Summit this Friday, April 17th, 2026. And thank you, Lou. Thank you, Anna. This was really so enriching and fulfilling. I've enjoyed every moment of it.
Well, thank you for having me. I have loved this chat, and I can't wait to meet people.
Thanks for listening to Connecting the Dots. If today's conversation gave you something to think about, share it with someone who'd enjoy it too. You can find all of our episodes on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And if you follow the show, leave a rating. It helps more people discover our work. Until next time, keep connecting the dots and keep building the future you want to see.